Yeah, but I burn out my adrenals.
So
Yeah,
let's kick it off. Let's start the recording. And we're also live on, hopefully on YouTube in a couple of seconds.
great.
Then it's good to see you. Welcome to my podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having
And
me.
that to have you here. Where are you currently?
I am in my girlfriend's house in Clearwater, Florida.
Oh, that's great. How is
Yeah.
life in Florida these days?
Florida's Florida. It's a funny state. It's kind of beautiful. It's flat, you got great beaches. I mean, where she's at, she's got some of the greatest beaches in the state. And but Florida's it's a different breed of cat down here. Politically, it's great. Um, Culturally, it changes. I mean, street to street, it's really a funny state. But it's a big state. I mean, I think this, if I was to compare landmass here, I would say it's something compared to like maybe almost Italy or close to it. I'd have to put them next to each other. But Florida's a huge state, and as you may know, like the U.S., I mean, every state is culturally different. Is sometimes like a European nation, not maybe by language, but and I'm up in Tennessee, which is 2 states north. That's where I live usually, and it's an hour and a half flight, and you're changing cultures every time you fly back and forth. It's really funny.
That's interesting to hear. I'm in Europe, in Vienna, and I think we have a quite stereotypical view on the United States. There is just the United States from our
Yeah,
perspective.
yeah. A lot of Europeans, what their view of the United States is of course Hollywood, and what gets publicized from Hollywood. Well, Hollywood, of course, is Los Angeles. It's changing a little bit where you have Atlanta, Georgia, on the other side of the country, which has become like a Hollywood part two, which is a weird thing that happened. But people think that California people are Americans, like that's just Americans, and it's funny to Americans because we go, you know definitely not. We are definitely not like California people, especially Southern California
Mm.
people. And you know it's funny. Are you a rock and roll guy?
Um, a little bit,
A
but
little
I
bit.
think I drifted more towards metal in my youth, and now
Yeah.
I think I'm more back to the less nuanced popular music, pop music. It's just
Yeah.
what's playing on the radio. What about you?
Yeah, I'm more of a rock and roll guy. Do you remember the Pixies from
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah,
late
yeah,
80s,
yeah,
early
yeah,
90s?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was a great band that kind of kicked off the whole alternative music thing and the whole grunge thing. But the band, their bass player, Kim, split off and went, I forgot what her band was called. She broke off and did her own kind of band. And so they got this one bass player. I think it was the bass player from Kurt Cobain's wife's band, Hole, and she's a California guy, but these guys are East Coast people. So they
Mhm.
toured apparently for a year and then they broke up and they were interviewed. They're like, "So why'd you guys break up?" And they go, "Well, she's like an LA girl and we're like East Coasters." Yeah. Now outside of this country, nobody's gonna get what that means. But
Yeah.
here it's really funny because that's a huge difference from somebody from the East Coast of the United States and from Los Angeles. I mean, it's completely different, and I'm sure they would drive each other absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, I
Uh,
heard I heard it in some podcasts, especially during the pandemic. A lot of people, I think, left California for
mhm.
Florida. They moved
Yeah.
there. Ben Shapiro, I think, is also from California and now down to Florida, which brings us to the topic because I read or I saw on YouTube that Florida also seems to be the let's say the center of Bitcoin. Last week there was this Bitcoin, or 2 weeks ago there was this Bitcoin conference where Michael Saylor, Kathy Wood discussed, and it brings us to the topic of our podcast, the
Mhm.
intersection of art and business, NFTs, crypto, and the future of money. Then give me a little bit of background. What are you doing professionally, usually?
Yeah, artist and entrepreneur investor. I mean, I sum it up in 3 words. I love art, I love entrepreneurship and business, and I love investing. I mean, it's that quick and easy.
Let's dig a little bit deeper into that. What are you doing professionally in your business life as a business person?
Yeah, in business, I really have I've gone a lot of different directions, and everything from telecom and everything. But it's really blossomed into where I'm at in business now, which is almost all internet marketing. I love internet
Mhm,
marketing.
mhm,
It's
mhm.
To me, I feel like it's the wild west of business. Whereas like being in telecom, for example, or in a lot of other business, there's a lot of rules and regulations, and we have FCC and all this corporate red tape everywhere. And internet marketing is great because um it's it's how good are you and how much can you prove a product, and there's a really easy access point for people, so a lot of people come into it, but that means that there's a lot of people who aren't good at it, which is excellent for people who are, you know. And a lot of people are like, oh, there's so much competition. I love that, because that means that there's a whole bunch of people creating a lot of disillusioned people. So when they find somebody who's good, they stick with them, and client longevity lasts for quite a bit longer than, you know, say, you know, when you're dealing with cell phones or whatever the next best, you know, consumer electronics garbage is.
That's a great perspective on this. I like that angle. Let's stay a little bit with stereotypical thinking. We were already there. So there is mostly in Europe, you have that business person, and they're doing business, and that's it. You combine business with art. What are you doing? What is your calling as an artist?
Well, I mean, as an artist, I mean, I've just been an artist my whole life. That's just what I do. It's what I've always done. And you know, business kind of came in as an accident, and marketing was even more accidental, right? It was just, you know, I had kids really young, and art wasn't paying the bills when I was really young, and so I had to you know, pay for kids. I mean, that was really the genesis of the whole business thing. But then you find out that business is great, and business is its own art form, and marketing was its own art form, and I love those. So that really culminated into where I'm at now, which is marketing as a business, and I love it. But as an artist, you know, I'm a contemporary artist, and I do what I call delusionism, which is a word that basically me and my daughter made up to describe the type of art that I do. And I can get into that later, but it's just that with art, it's just very intrinsic to you. And I find that, you know, artists and musicians and are very creative and make excellent business people, because they're not fixed in the mind at all. You know, you can move in and out of situations where some people may not. A lot of you know, one example is had this marketing guy that I was going to hire. He was just a very fixed thinker. You know, he's a degreed marketer, had his MBA, all sorts of stuff like that, and I just couldn't get along with this guy. I was just like, he's just too in the box. And I'm like, boy, do you not live in a box world, dude. I go, whatever they taught you in school is certainly not going to work in today's day and age. I'm like, you got to lose the rules, man. And so, but it was funny because he was a very smart guy too. So it's not really an intelligence thing. It's more of I would consider it a training thing, because I've met some very intelligent, trained guys that are very unsuccessful, and some reasonably or maybe mildly unintelligent people who didn't have those rules and are wildly successful in it. And we just live in a cool day and age. Yeah.
So and then you break the next rule set. So you have the stereotypical business person in you, then you have the stereotypical artist in you, and the third position you have is investment. What's the story behind that?
Well, it's just at some point you go, what do I do with my money? I mean, that's really where it comes from. You go, God, what do I do with it? And you know, and you think about your future just like everybody else. I have kids, so you think about that. But I've, you know, for some time now, at least over a decade, have not been a fan of cash. And that little mixture there of what do you do with your money? And I don't like cash anymore. After the market crash here, and probably worldwide, really, in 2000, what was that? 2008, November of 2008. And then it really started hitting us 2009, 2010, 2011, when the Federal Reserve of the United States was dumping just money into the economy. Just cash became not valuable, right? And now it's even more so. So I was just, that's where, as an investor, it wasn't something that I grew up like, oh, I want to be an investor. But you start to have to solve problems. Like, well, if I hold my dollar here for 3 years, it's now worth, you know, 35 cents.
Almost nothing.
Well, yeah, almost nothing compared to that.
Before the recording, I watched an interview with Ray Dalio. He was interviewed for Yahoo Finance, and they were elaborating on the effects of inflation on the value of dollar.
Yeah.
A little bit of research. Yesterday, the Producers Price Index came out for Germany, and it increased by 30% year-over-year, which is pretty hefty. What is your opinion on cash these days?
Well, there's the whole phrase that flies around the United States now, which is cash is trash. So that's about what I think about it. I mean, it's still the way that things get paid for in a lot of capacities, I suppose, but I certainly keep as little of it as I have to as a person, you know. So like you and I've talked before. So I'm into cryptos and alternative places that I feel are going to be better storages of cash, maybe even producing equity. But at a minimum, I think of them as just maintaining some sort of value, like Bitcoin. People are like, oh, it's so volatile. And I go, well, compared to what? Like, I went down from 60,000 to 30,000 in 6 weeks. I'm like, well, okay. I buy these ribeye steaks every week. I like a good ribeye, and these ribeye steaks, I'll get 3 of them a week. And I kid you not, 7 months ago, they were $32. Good deal, maybe $34. This is Whole Foods grass-fed steaks, good deal. And they were like $32, $34, and you get 3 of them, and they were the same size. And now those are $65 and $70 for the same 3 steaks.
Wow, that's doubled.
Double. So we get reports here that say like, oh, well, it's 6% inflation, 7% inflation, and then our gas prices are doubled.
This is nonsense.
It's bullshit. It's total nonsense.
It's the same here in Europe. I mean, we have the situation in Ukraine. And I think it came as a surprise to many people that a lot of supply chains start in the Ukraine. A lot of food industry, for example. There was also a podcast, the All In podcast, where they elaborated on the situation in the Ukraine and the effects on the food industry. And wheat, the Ukraine is one of the largest wheat producers that is sold to North Africa. And we also see the impact here in Europe. I think we have 6 to 7% inflation rate is a little bit downplayed. In some sectors, we go up to 60, 70, 80% already. It's the same in the United States.
Yeah, no, it's really a crazy thing that's going on. And every country, of course, I think it's a little bit insular to this, but they think that, oh, it's just my country doing this. I go, oh no, this is not just your country doing this. This is a 100% coordinated thing. And it's, I'm one of those schools of thought that goes, there's nothing accidental about it at all. This has been rolled out, and I could go down that rabbit hole real deep.
We could talk a lot about conspiracy theories in another podcast. Let's talk more about what we can make out of the situation. You mentioned before that you are an advocate for Bitcoin. What's the perspective from you as an artist and a business person on Bitcoin? Why do you value Bitcoin?
Well, it's digital gold. I mean, that's really how I think about it, is this digital gold. It's different than other cryptos. And, it's funny saying cryptocurrency. The whole crypto world, is the verbiage is changing and the words are changing. Everything is changing so rapidly. It's hard to keep up, and you start to find your little niches. Some guys are going into metaverse and whatever. But what I like about Bitcoin is that it kind of just operates as gold. It's fixed supply and easily transferable all over the world. It's really a good storage of value. And is it indestructible to that? No. Something could happen. I don't know. I mean, you can't do a typical rug pull like you see with other cryptos. That I've been busted in a few of those, and some other people have. But you couldn't do a typical rug pull.
What is that? Can you explain it a little bit more? Rug pull?
Oh yeah. So like you'll get these guys coming up with a new cryptocurrency, right? And based off of nothing, by the way. It's some of these are like total jokes, like meme coins. You'll hear meme coins. They'll be like Shiba Inu and stuff like that, which is apparently wildly successful.
Did you hear the latest interview from Elon Musk where he got the question? It was a TED interview. He got a question: why do you promote Dogecoin? And his answer was, I like dogs and I like meme. And this is the reason why I promote Dogecoin. So it's quite interesting. Is it similar to that?
Well, that's exactly what that is. That's a meme coin. So there's a whole bunch of those. And they really are valued from nothing. It's all PR. It's a whole PR world. So they create a value. So those things, one of the things you'll see is these rug pulls are getting relatively common. So a bunch of guys will create all this fluff, all this online PR. And then once they get the value in there, a handful of investors will yank the value out of there.
So it's a pump and dump scheme, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. And then everybody who was involved in it loses all their money, and those, handful of guys make a few $1,000,000. And there's, I'm sure we'll see some sort of legal recourse on that at some point soon. But I mean, this is the Wild West of crypto. So these things have to happen in order for things to get regulated and things like that. But, I think it would be hard for Bitcoin to be doing something like that. I mean, nobody controls the whole, power supply of that, right? And so that's why I like it. I just think it's a good, safe place. If you're going to go into crypto and just going to store your wealth somewhere instead of cash, it's as good as anything. And it's, with a lot of these other things too, they operate more like stocks, really, when you look at them. Even Ethereum, in a way, even though Ethereum's like a base layer crypto, they operate like stocks, and Bitcoin still does not. It's still like a storage of wealth. The only thing that I think is funny with any crypto is you're starting to see what you would see in the stock market. Somebody puts out some bad news, the whole market drops, people dump in, put out some good news, it goes up, and then they add their wealth. So you're starting to see a lot of that over the years, which is, not unexpected. I mean, that's just going to be the way that it is. But, like I said, digital gold, that's how I view it. It's just,
yeah. Warren Buffett pointed out it's similar with equities. He said most of the world's stock have a high volatility, and they go up and down by 80 to 90% year over year. So it's quite normal. And Bitcoin but Bitcoin, I guess, seems not to be that volatile. What's your opinion on the volatility of Bitcoin?
Well, I guess it depends on how you look at it. If you look at it from purely a price perspective, it would be explosive because let's call it March of 2020, you're buying it for, I think the low was $3,800 a coin back then. And then it went, kind of hit like 8,800, was still an amazing deal, which it was relatively. And then it exploded all the way up in whatever it was, 9 or 10 months, I think, up to like 61,000. And then it dropped all the way down to 30,000. Everybody's like, oh, it's a crypto winter and Bitcoin winter. And you could view it as volatile from that perspective. Now, if you add in other factors, it's not so volatile. Like if you look at the value or purchasing power of a dollar, like in the United States right now, real estate in, good areas. Not just real estate. I should say anything luxury goods, real estate, anything that can be used as a storage of money, so you're not having the cash, is just crazy right now. There's houses that were, selling for a few $100,000, selling for $1 million now. I mean, there's one I was just looking at here in Florida. I mean, it's like an $800,000 house. Okay. And they're trying to get 2.25 million for it, and they'll probably get it. I mean, and we're talking about in under 2 years.
In under 2 years?
Under 2 years. Crazy dollars being spent on real estate here. But, same with collector cars, collector watches, luxury watches, like all this kind of stuff is just exploded. And, I'm not going to act like I know everything about it. I look at it from my perspective and I go, well, if anybody's remotely even thinking like I am, that has some, cash that they just don't want to leave as cash because it's just going to turn into nothing, they're going to want to move it into assets. So I feel like there's this fast grab of assets to retain value, and there's probably more to it than that, I'm sure. But
I think this is the fear of inflation that plays a role with that. But real estate is pretty complicated in comparison to Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin you can buy very easy. What is your perspective on? Let's stay a little bit with Bitcoin before we move on to the other topics. Michael Saylor is the CEO of MicroStrategy, and he buys Bitcoin with that. So basically, he takes out loan with his company that he converts in Bitcoin.
I was just reading that.
Yeah, you heard it?
Yeah.
That's great. And his perspective is, I buy and hold. I do the Warren Buffett method. I buy Bitcoin, I hold it, I take out debt because I'm pretty sure that it will go up over the next 10 years. And when I open the internet, I get a lot of webinars that I may attend that want to teach me how to make money with trading Bitcoin on a day-to-day basis. What's your investment approach when you talk about Bitcoin, when you think about Bitcoin?
Same as Michael Saylor's. I just buy it and hold it. First of all, I'm too busy to trade it. And that's a whole, practical thing in and of itself. And I know guys that have done well at that. I just met one not too long ago, as a matter of fact. But I just don't have the time to invest in that, in watching it, and then the complication of it. I can really appreciate it, and it'd be fun to just sit at a computer all day and just flip things around. But I just am too busy doing other things to where, like I said, it'd be like 30 years ago. What would I do with my cash? Well, I'd probably put it into real estate and gold. Bitcoin didn't exist, so now it's real estate, Bitcoin, and gold, and maybe some other items where I just want to stick the cash. And if I'm not going to put it into some cash flowing entity like a business or something like that, then I'm going to want it put in something solid. So Yeah, I did get pretty curious about it and start reading about it, but you know, when it comes to things like taxation and some aspects, I go, I'll just stick with the sailor approach, or you know, many other investor approach. Buy it, hold it, sit on it. I act like it's not even there.
You were talking about Bitcoin and gold. So it's not Bitcoin is like gold. So you said you buy Bitcoin and gold. I'm interested in your price expectation. We are in this a crystal ball area, and Cathie Wood in January issued her yearly Big Ideas report, in which she made the case for Bitcoin will be worth $1 million per coin in 2030. What's your expectation when you look at Bitcoin and gold? Where will the price be in 10 years, in your opinion?
You know, you just never know. You just never know. I wish I could say some, you know, reasonably intelligent, clairvoyant thing, but I just don't know. I mean, all I know is that it's safer than holding on to, you know, Federal Reserve paper, worthless dollars. You know, that's what I do know. So it's going to go at least up or at least stable. And again, I'm using it as a cash hedge. So if it's a cash hedge, then great, I win. If it goes up to like an incredible $1 million per coin, boy, do you really win. And you know, I know this guy here, nice guy. He's a handyman. He's just like a little construction guy doing handyman jobs and stuff. And he was buying Bitcoin years ago when it was just cheap, just as a hobby. Well, then it took off, and he's now wealthy. And it was kind of interesting because he had to move out of his little small town because everybody found out that he was rich, and then all of a sudden he had all these new friends. You know
you get a lot of friends when you make a little bit of money.
Yep, and his family changed. Everybody changed on him, so he ended up moving to Nashville, and just so he didn't know anybody. He didn't know anybody in Nashville. He just wanted to be in a new environment. And it was fun talking to him about, you know, what he's doing and what I do, because, you know, my primary interest is cash flowing organisms like businesses. Right? Like the best investment you can get into is something that cash flows you. But when we're talking about cash hedges, it's a bit of a different subject. But yeah.
That's true. That's true. No, I see a lot of perspective in Bitcoin. I mean, it's a well-established asset meanwhile. And I don't see a reason why companies like shouldn't do what Michael Saylor does, or what Jack Dorsey does with also with Square, now it's called Block, to put it on their balance sheet. And when companies in Europe and in the United States start buying Bitcoin with a limited supply, there is only one way where the price can go, and it goes up. Yeah. I think the only risk that can happen is that the European Union and the United States government turns it off like China did. Do you see such risks in the United States, that there are some politicians who would like to?
I don't know that I see that. I mean, boy, you'd have to have some real problems to do that in the US, because, you know, it's not just guys like me and you buying this. We're talking major financial institutions investing in this. So, and these guys, you know, this is the revolving door of the government. You know, these guys go into the government, then they go into the businesses. They go into the government, they go into the businesses. So are they really going to block themselves from that? And I don't really think so, but who knows? Maybe we could get some huge catastrophe and some major thing. It turns us into financial martial law, where they're like, you're using this and that's it, and everything's cut off. And even if that happened, I wouldn't say that that's permanent. But we did, you know, we were cut off from gold from one of our presidents, and so that's happened. So it's not like we don't have precedent. We do. So, but 70s, it's unlikely.
It was in the 70s. Nixon, I guess, was it? So
yeah,
good old the gold standard.
Good old Tricky Dick. Yeah, he turned off the gold standard, and so we, you know, I mean, it could happen, but I just think it's unlikely, just due to the people that are involved. And if somebody was pulling some incredible trick on the world economy to steal wealth, this would be one of the best ones I've ever seen. I mean, it would just be incredible. But yeah, unlikely.
That's good news. I think it won't happen in Europe either, that something like that happens. And then we have 1 billion people that have the potential basically to buy Bitcoin and move parts of their other assets into Bitcoin. There was another password a couple of years ago. Gary Vaynerchuk, I heard it first from Gary Vaynerchuk, which was quite interesting. It was, I think, in 2018, 19 something, where he brought up this term NFTs, and
Mm.
I just ignored it like I did 10 years ago with Bitcoin. I didn't buy anything. You're an artist, and I would like to hear your opinion about NFTs.
Well, I'm not surprised about artists leading the NFT movement, you know, and we're not just talking painters and fine artists and digital artists, you know, doing like this, you know, the Bored Ape thing and all that. We're talking about musicians and everything. Okay. It's not atypical for artists to lead any sort of revolution like that. Like in the US, what'll happen in a city, any city, by the way, is like you'll go to, any neighborhood, and what'll happen is it'll be some rundown neighborhood. The artists move in, and it becomes cool, and then you get the galleries and you get the lofts, and it becomes cool. Well, then the yuppies come in with all the money. The funny thing is then they change the whole neighborhood because it's cool again, and then the artists can't afford to live there anymore. So the artists come in and make the neighborhood cool,
Yeah.
and then they can't. Then they're just booted from their own neighborhood. They have to do it with
That's
a new neighborhood.
interesting.
It's pretty typical of a lot of cities that you'll see it, and that's how I view a lot of what happens with any of this. I mean, it was the same with the internet. The artists came in, and you can really view a lot of these computer guys as they're artists in and of themselves. I mean, these guys are creating things and changing culture, and that's what an artist is a culture changer. And I really feel that this is not a surprise that, you know, you've got these guys coming in, and you know, so anyway, when it comes to the NFTs in and of themselves, right, I'm not a huge NFT buyer, just so you know. I have plans on how to utilize them, and I've been really paying attention to how people are using them.
How can you use them as an artist? What is the
Yeah,
technology doing to art?
well, again, it's super young, and you know, a lot of people look at it as like, well, I'm just buying a digital art piece. Okay, that's true. You are buying a digital art piece, and yeah, you're going to be able to look at it on digital devices, and you're going to have digital, you know, basically TVs on your wall where you can show the stuff as digital art, and that's all cool. I'm a little bit of a traditionalist with that. I like paint, and if I'm going to buy art from my favorite artists, I want his hand on it. I want that guy's hand on it. I want his paint. I wanted his life in it, and that's me personally. I'm sure there's a lot of people like me that are very traditional with that. But you know, there's already artists who, and there's already ways with NFTs where you can cash flow your NFT. You can actually sell the NFT and reserve a part of it. And so then if they license the NFT, you get licensing fees for the whole life of that NFT. Stuff like that is happening.
Okay.
And like the artist now can, if I was a record label in the music world, I would be, you know, crapping my pants about now, because this is another time where artists are bypassing and circumventing the system and going direct to the consumer and giving the consumer the right. So there's you could sit there and have some artists go, well, I'm going to sell my song and you can license it, right? And then you know, I want $500,000 for my song, and then you guys get all the licensing rights. Well, back in the old days, 30 years ago, you would have to go get a record deal, all right, and then they would give you a royalty advance of say $1 million or something like that. And you record all your album, you do all this stuff, and so now you're in debt to the record label. Then you got to, you know, you do all the sales and all this. Then they put you out into the marketing machine, and you're making literally pennies on the dollar. And one band I know of personally, because I know they're one of their old managers, these guys were touring through the 90s for 18 months straight. And after that 18-month long tour, which you can imagine how hard that is in a band, they were still in debt over $1 million to the record label. And most bands don't have a long lifespan. Yeah. So when you have business like that for an artist, and then you have an artist working that hard and is still a freaking starving artist, not even a starving artist, but now an indebted artist, they're going to be like, you know, they're just going to go fuck the system. That's what they're going to say. And they're going to figure it out. No, it's not. And that's why this NFT thing is just going to explode for the arts. It's going to explode for legal. I mean, you're going to see, I mean, we're already seeing it. I'm acting like we haven't seen this already. You know, contracts are going to be NFTs. All of this stuff is going to be NFT. People are using letters as NFT. Now it's just a really amazing explosive thing.
Let's stay a little bit with the musician use case. I was not aware of that. So your opinion is that, I mean, the old word you explained was that basically a musician, a band like what was Rolling Stones, for example, had to sign a contract with a label, a record label. They gave all the rights away to the record label, and the record label was responsible for promoting the songs and making money with it and returned a little bit. And now with NFTs, the musicians can reverse the process. So they set up an NFT.
They can go right to me and you.
And
They can go right to me and you.
Really?
See, the only trick here is that you know, PR is kind of the thing. Public relations is the trick, right? Do you remember Creedence Clearwater Revival? CCR? Yeah, great band. John Fogerty is an extremely talented guy who I love to death. But you know, there's a bit of a sad story with this guy with the labels he was with, you know, through the 70s, where they owned all of his stuff, and he wasn't even able to perform some of his stuff live. And after he'd split with them, they really just abused. I would just say abused him. Now they had every legal right to do so, because these guys go in signing up back in those days. They had no attorneys. They're just like, yeah, great, I want to be a musician. Great. Well, but they owned everything. They owned the rights to everything, and they didn't care. And so it's not that they're doing anything illegal or maybe even consider immoral. It's just business. And so that's the really great thing about today's day and age, is that business is hitting such a granular level. So you can take some dork, you know, messing around with electronic beats in his room, and he doesn't look the part, he doesn't act the part, but now you don't have to see him, right? But he could be an amazing beat maker, and he can sell his stuff directly, and he can transfer rights directly.
That's true.
He can bypass everything now. It's a very incredible ability. And so when people are like, oh, you know, too much competition, look, there was always this much competition, right? But now we live in a digital age where you're marketed to every which way from Sunday, and you see it every which way from Sunday. So it's the appearancy of it, but your opportunity has also exponentially grown. I mean,
so for example, let's put the story a little bit further. For example, a musician, someone who likes to create new beats. If that exists, I'm not a musician, so I don't know.
Yeah.
So this person can then go, for example, on TikTok and promote his or her beat, and probably with a link where she or he says, if you like that beat, you can directly go here, download the NFT, which in principle is a contract, a stand-up contract, and you can use the beat however you want, and the NFT makes sure that I get my share when you make money with that. Is that the right perspective on NFTs?
More or less. I mean, that's kind of how I'm thinking where these not only are and where they're going. I mean, there's obviously people I'm not in the music aspect of it, but you know, there's people in the music aspect like Snoop Dogg and all these market leaders that are really vanguarding it rapidly. But it's probably going to get to points where in the 90s, you know, you had sampling of music, and you could take pieces of music, put it in a song, reproduce it, and then sell the song. Like the Beastie Boys did a whole album like that, and nobody was getting sued for that. And then it became court precedent where one guy got sued because that was a copywritten song, and then you couldn't sample beats anymore. And if you did sample, you had to pay the artist. Well, see, now it would be like, there was a joke, David Bowie back in the 90s, by the way, they were talking about his song getting sampled, and he basically said, they're like, do you care if your songs get sampled? And he goes, not so long as I get paid, right? And he's right. But now imagine that you want to put together a beat, okay, and you like this beat, and you like this guitar riff from this other artist. You say, hey, let me license the NFTs. See what I mean? See, now you can just go direct to everybody and just put together this whole sampled thing. And, you know, like, hey, Sting, let me sample your song from 1979 and put it in the song. He's like, great, here's the NFT. I mean, again, I'm not going to act like
that's an interesting thought, because they basically don't have to interact anymore. They don't need to negotiate directly. So Sting can basically sit down, define his terms of a contract on the Ethereum blockchain, and put it somewhere online on a marketplace and say, everybody who wants that can just buy the NFTs. I have 500 here, just use it however you like. They don't even have to meet anymore to sign a contract. They don't need attorneys or lawyers.
I know. Well, that's where that's where it gets into a whole nother conversation of how attorneys and lawyers move into the NFT space, and how contracts move into the NFT space, because now it's there forever. So it's just, like I said, we live in a really fascinating time, and there's guys that are just so creative out there. And, you know, as an artist, for me, I just look at it as like, well, how am I going to utilize it? Because I'm an old school painter. I like paint. I like getting my hands dirty. I like seeing it. My my work, when you see it on a wall, there's no real replacement digitally that seeing it on a wall is going to replace. So you come in and you see it on a wall, there's character, there's life, there's momentum. And when you see it as a photo, people are like, oh, that's very cool, but it's, it's like this big,
Mhm.
how do you mimic that digitally? And I'm not really into that so much. However, like, for example, I would sell an NFT, and these are just things that I'm thinking of, like very topical ways that I would use NFT for me, is if somebody wanted to buy a piece, right? Let's say that piece was a $25,000 piece. I would sell that for, whatever the going rate is on Ethereum. And frankly, I kind of don't care what they buy it for, because I'm going to convert it to probably Bitcoin or Ethereum anyway. They could buy it with Cardano or whatever.
Mhm.
But that NFT would represent the purchase. See what I mean? So now there's the receipt, there's the buy. The art is inconsequential to the purchase. The NFT represented the purchase. And if I wanted to, I probably could keep a portion of that for future licensing. And I would say, hey, listen, you're going to get the licensing rights because you bought the piece. So here's the NFT, which gives you the licensing rights. But I want a 20%. I want 20% override on that or something.
How was the old process? How was the old way that you sell your art without NFTs? How did the process look like?
Well, you'd have a gallery, pre-COVID, I had a gallery, you'd sell your art directly to a gallery, but you sell the piece. Somebody takes a photo, reproduces it. I mean, what are you going to do? Right. So it's really your whole thing is selling the piece, period. Or like, in social media days, social media is great because people contact you directly. You can sell it via Instagram. I mean, your websites were a bit passé. Now I have a website, of course, but your channels for selling worldwide are, as we all know, I mean, they're incredible. So you just have all of those options, but it's changed to that degree where now you could have that representation there. If I wanted to license it, it's a little bit more complicated. You know what I mean? And like in my gallery, I'd have people taking photos of my stuff in my gallery and just publishing it all over Instagram. Well, that's cool because that gives me PR, which I'm very big on the PR thing, right? But how do I control that? I really can't. But with an NFT, you can, because you're on the base of it. And if people want to share it or publicize it or use it in a movie or whatever they want to do, put it on some news clip or whatever, well, they have to pay a licensing fee, and I can add myself to that as a licensor. So the person who buys the NFT gets the artwork and then can do that, but then they can transfer it. So in the fine art world, anybody that's really into investing, I'm sure their hands are in the fine art world at this point, because the fine art world has become like the watch world and the crypto world. It's been more of an investment play now than just appreciation of art. A lot of people act like it isn't, but it's garbage. It's just total investment play. So somebody will buy a piece, and from the artist or the art dealer or the gallery that represents the artist, right? Well, they might get a good deal there, and let's say they buy a piece for 1.2 million. Well, they could send it to auction, and that thing starts to balloon up to over $4 or $5 million just at auction. Or they could buy a piece directly from the dealer or the gallery, and then they could go flip it and double their money immediately. And they'll have all these contracts that sound like you can't have no flipping for 4 or 5 years, but I don't know that anybody follows that. You see what I mean? So it's what every industry has their own little investments that they can do, and how NFTs play into this is going to be super cool. I'm really looking forward to how there's going to be way more creative people than me coming up with how they use it. And what I'll do as an artist is I know what I like to do, and I will. I'm not ignoring this at all. All I'm going to do is let all of these creative, brilliant minds that are in this space come up with what works for me the best, because I know the path I want to go, and all I have to do is find which one works for me the most. And a lot of people think they have to be trailblazers and figure it all out. Well, you don't. Just know where you want to go and allow the market to create what's going to work for what you do and where you want to be. And that's how I'm treating it right now. So I stay as intelligent as I have to for that. I'm not a coder, I'm not a programmer, I'm not some blockchain developer, but I do stay up with the technology because I don't want to get left behind. And I do want to stay on the cutting edge of that to the degree that it forwards the purpose of what I like to do as an artist.
But that's just me repeat it what I understood from what you said. I mean, I always saw the process of selling art or selling paintings, for example, like you do, as a very complicated process. So on one hand, you as an artist have to sell to a gallery, and you get money from the gallery then basically. And I, as a customer, would need to fly somewhere in the world to the gallery, buy your painting, and then I have the problem that I have to transport it from the United States back to Europe, and then I have to store it somewhere. So I need to take care of the painting, which is, in my opinion, very complicated. And when I want to sell it to another person, I need lawyers, I need contracts, and it's another process.
Yeah, it's a whole biz. Yeah.
When I think it through from this NFT perspective, it suddenly makes sense to me, because we could just simplify the process and add more nuance to it. You sell the painting still to the gallery, just to bring it in an example, and promote then the NFT, so the painting could stay in the gallery as a place to store the painting for the next coming years, and you just sell the NFT, and the gallery all gets for taking care of the painting the share. You as an artist get a share, and the person who sells it gets then also the share from it. And you don't have to move the painting around anymore. Is that a possibility in your opinion? Is this
Listen, anything's possible like that, but I do think that your overall point there is definitely where it's going, is just instantaneous transactions. I mean, think about just currencies, in our two countries 10 years ago. If I wanted to fly to Paris and hang out, and then go to Italy and hang out, I have to transfer currencies and all this other kind of stuff. And no matter where I'm at in the world, I've got problems. And will this work here? Will this work here? And I could get trapped in something. But with things like Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, really, not that you simplify anything, and it's right now, right on your phone. And that's the opportunity that NFT is going to give you. How it gets utilized is going to be as creative as anybody can make it, because again, you are really in the Wild West. So who's going to come in and make the rules? Well, there is no rules. Everybody's making them right now. The only rule is the blockchain, the history. It's there. It's a ledger, right? That's the rule. So however anybody turns this into money-making opportunities or wealth-building opportunities or licensing opportunities is going to be as creative as the people are,
That's very interesting. Yeah. When Gary Vaynerchuk promoted NFTs, he's coming from the collectible sector. Like, I think baseball cards are his thing. And at one point in time, he started promoting NFTs. You have to buy NFTs, and I looked at it and saw these funny apes. You can buy a JPEG of an ape, and I said, what should I do with that? Why should that be of value to anybody in 5 years or 10 years? It's different to Bitcoin. But the angle that you bring into the discussion is, you just see it as a contract. The NFT is a contract in which you can code the terms of the contract between different parties, and then you just move the NFT around without the physical property. And
give it use. And I mean, the thing I'm always interested too is not only that, but the use and the cash flowing of it, right? Because how can you move it and make it cash flow? You can allow somebody usage of it, but they know I own it, or they know that the person who I sold it to owns it, right? So it's a pretty interesting thing. I've already done like an art deal, like where I did that exact thing, where I sold the NFT as representation of the art. They got the art piece, right? And then it's up to them from there. Do they want to sell the art? Do they want to retain the NFT? Do they just want the licensing rights? See, then it becomes a money-making opportunity for them too, which in the art world, is anybody who lives in the art world, we all tend to know, and especially in the investment grade art world, it's there's a lot of opportunity for, there's things you can do. For example, like let's say you bought a work for $5 million and you donated that as an individual or as a foundation or something to a museum. Well, that's a tax deductible donation in the United States. You see what I mean? It's a $5 million tax deduction. Or, well, I'm oversimplifying things, but just get the concept of what I'm saying. But with NFTs, you could probably do a similar thing, now, but the ownership is then tracked. So you gift the NFT, and then the artwork may travel, right? But the ownership could be owned by whatever museum that you've gifted it to. right? So the NFT would have the thing that would actually be the thing that has value representing the live painting. And as you said, the painting could travel. It may not travel. It might sit in a museum in Paris, right? It's just a really interesting concept to think of, but it's going to work like money works.
Yeah, you can start wholesaling. I mean, you brought up the topic of PR. Maybe we dig a little bit into PR now.
Yeah.
When I think about my life, for example, I mean, art is interesting, and I like your paintings. I saw it on Instagram. But the minute I start thinking about, okay, I buy this picture. It becomes complicated, because then the process kicks in. Okay, I need to fly to the United States. I need to bring it to Europe. I need to store it somewhere, and then I want to make money. So basically, I need to sell it to someone, and this means I need to negotiate with a gallery, and then I need to find a buyer. But when we can do this NFT thing, basically my work then just boils down to public relations. I have 28,000 followers with the podcast. So if I have the opinion that when I promote your art on my podcast, that I can increase the price through PR, I just need the NFT. As I keep the painting, keep it in your gallery, give me the NFT, and I just promote the NFT, and I don't need the entire process anymore.
That's right. You could be flipping stuff without even having it. You know what I mean? So you could let's say you buy a piece of work from me, right? And you could go do a bunch of publicity on that piece of work, flip it for double, and you haven't taken delivery or anything. It's still sitting in my studio.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just, the opportunities are endless. And thinking, once you start getting into the creative concept of how all this works and understanding what the blockchain is,
this is great.
It's super cool. I mean, it's a really exciting time to be in business, not just the arts, but be in business, because this is going to come into the business world. I mean, if Bitcoin becomes, not that I think it's going to become the underlying currency of the world, by the way, digital currency is inevitable to me. People are like, we got to stay on cash. I was like, look, I understand why you'd want to say we want to stay on cash, and that's the real dollar for each country, and having your own central bank for each country is great. I get it. But it's just unrealistic. I mean, watch any sci-fi movie. That's definitely where we're going. We're going to credits and digital currencies, and that's just all there is to it. Cash will completely disappear, and there's no avoiding it. Especially when you have things like pandemics. No matter what anybody thinks about the pandemic, what's going to be one of the biggest germ transfers is that nasty old dollar that goes from hand to hand and everybody's wallet right on their ass cheek, and it's just disgusting, right? I mean, just from that standpoint, it's just going to disappear, right? Anyway,
I don't like cash anyway, so I'm fully digital, I think, since 15 years or so. All this credit card and paying with credit card, which didn't work quite well here in Europe, because a lot of restaurants didn't accept credit card for bills below 15 euros. So when they just walk somewhere in and drink a coffee, they didn't accept it. It changed with the pandemic, as you mentioned, because of the infection perspective that you risk with transferring cash from one person to the other. Let's move to PR. I would like to hear your opinion. I mean, you have a lot of buzzwords in that area. So public relations, marketing, advertising, SEO. Can you explain your definition of public relations, PR? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, really in short, if you really think about what PR is, it's just getting an idea of some sort into somebody's head. That's really what it is, right? You can complicate it. I've read a million definitions of PR, but that's all it really is. If we would just want to get down to it, you go to school with people, right? And you go to high school, and there was the brainiac. Well, everybody knew him as the brainiac. He has a name, he has a family, he has friends, but you knew him as the brainiac. There was the slut. There was the school slut. We all know who the school slut was. Why do we know that? Because it traveled. Everybody's like, that chick is the slut. Or you have the you had the jock, the big jock guy, the big football player. We all had these. Well, that is PR. It's a concept that travels and it sticks, and it's always simple. And it's a really important concept because it underlies everything. It underlies advertising, it underlies marketing. And Europeans are a little bit better about the difference between those three things, in my experience of working with them. I'm serious, because you guys have it a little bit more separated, including words like business development. In America, it has really been bastardized. And one is the other, is the other, is the other. And you'll meet a sales guy and you'll be like, oh, he's like, I can do marketing. And you meet a marketing guy who's like, well, I'm a sales guy. And you'll meet an advertising guy who's like, well, I'm a business development guy. And you're like, no, none of you are any of that. They don't understand the separation, the use, and the sequence of use of how those things work together, because they're all very different. They're all their own technology. And when you get down to the fundamentals of what the words are, like advertising in and of itself means attraction of attention, right? And by almost always paid means, not always, but usually by paid means. A billboard is advertising. It's attraction of attention. The billboard gets views because it's sitting right on a 50,000 car a day driveway, right? Mm-hmm. And marketing comes from the word, I think it was from Mercatus, Latin Mercatus, which meant of the market, trading of the market, right? And marketing is more of an umbrella term. It means the whole process, from everything from product development and to promotional materials, all the way into usually the delivery of the product. For example, Amazon. Amazon wouldn't be nearly as successful as if it took 3 weeks to get all your stuff. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I've ordered stuff from Amazon. It shows up the same day. I'm like, how on earth did they do that? That is incredible. Well, that's part of their marketing process. So you have marketing as this umbrella term. Advertising is one sliver, one vertical, as we would say in the marketing world, of the whole marketing process, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're not the same thing. The other thing is that with PR, there's a phrase that I like in the marketing world, which is PR plants the seed and marketing waters the crop. So when you think of this whole umbrella of marketing, PR is a system that comes in before marketing. Mm-hmm. And I'll watch people burn marketing budgets like crazy because they have no PR, or they'll have bad PR, which is synonymous. No PR and bad PR to me are the same thing. Okay, unless you're in the music world.
Let's describe what is your definition for good PR? So,
well, good PR is anything that sells, really. It depends on your world. Okay, so if you're a burger joint, right, or you're a pastry place or something like that, and you have a bunch of bad reviews on the internet, well, that's bad PR, and you're not going to sell. See, in that business, bad PR is not good PR. No PR would be better than bad PR. Like the bad reviews, people, the first thing anybody does, they're like, hey, let's go find some croissants or something like that. They'll go on Google Maps or whatever you guys are using, Yelp in Europe. I don't know what your big one is over there, but you go on there and you say, oh, 1 star. Well, we're not going there. You didn't even give it a chance. You're off. That bad PR just cut the throat of that business. But now it doesn't work the same in, say, the music world, right? Where Elvis, who was sort of the, I would consider the front runner for all of this negative PR music sales stuff. He was doing this hip shaking stuff that was hyper controversial back then, and they would have to shoot him from the waist up. Well, it got him so much attention. And you'll hear in the entertainment business, like there's no such thing as bad PR. Michael Jackson hanging his kid out the window, or Eminem doing all of his super controversial stuff, or
Will Smith at the Oscar.
Yeah, Will Smith at the Oscars slapping him and Chris Rock. Well, Chris Rock and Will Smith now, if they weren't already, are known by pretty much everybody on the planet.
Everybody in the world. I mean, it's amazing. Will Smith was famous, but I wouldn't bet on everybody knew Will Smith or Chris Rock, for example. I mean, I didn't know Chris Rock that well before the Oscar incident. Do you think this was real, or do you think it was staged?
Who knows? I mean, we live in a PR spin world, dude. I mean, this is a PR spin world. I almost don't believe much of anything that I see on the media and TV anymore, because it's so controlled, and there's such brilliant PR people out there. Mm-hmm. And they'll say take a Miley Cyrus, Hannah Montana. They're like, all right, well, hey, we're gonna make you a superstar. So we're going to take this young, wholesome little girl, and we're going to turn you into a sex symbol who's literally dancing on the stage with dildos, which is true. That is not me kidding. So they took this wholesome girl and turned her into like Madonna times 10. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, of course, then she explodes. Call it what you want in terms of morals and ethics. I'm not even thinking of it in morals or ethics. I'm just thinking of it in terms of PR, a thought on the mind. And
so you can 10x your value with the right PR. You can 10x, 100x your value. I mean, Bitcoin is pretty much the same. I think 5 years, 6 years ago, Bitcoin was the technology of the nerds. I mean, it was on Big Bang Theory, for example. And then and I missed really the utility. I missed the use cases in 2017. It was the first time that I seriously looked into Bitcoin. I bought some. It was a very complicated process with a lot of commission to pay to get a hand on Bitcoin here in Austria. And I didn't really understand what I can do with Bitcoin back in 2017. It's just, okay, I can buy it, I can hold it. I didn't believe in the store of value theory, because back then, outside mathematicians or technology nerds, IT people, nobody used Bitcoin basically. So I said, okay, how can this become a store of value when nobody uses it? You need supply side. And then Michael Saylor, Anthony Pompliano, Gary Vaynerchuk, they all started promoting Bitcoin. And this is pure PR. Do I get the right?
Pure PR. I mean, there's probably, we've already heard all the improvements that could be made to, how much energy it produces to mine it and all that kind of stuff. But, it's the old Xerox philosophy. It's better to be first than better, right? It's better to be first than better. And that's, that I think is still true today. The PR world, it moves just as fast as the internet moves, which is also amazing. These are amazing opportunities. You can explode and be a superstar in no time. You can take a YouTube kid who's a nobody and do some relatively controversial things, and all of a sudden you're just this big hit and you have an empire and you're building an empire out of it. It's really incredible. But just getting down to the basics and fundamentals of what PR is, I mean, it's
and
just
what in your opinion, I would like to stop here for a second. The basics and fundamentals of PR, what are they in your opinion?
Well, it's to me, it's logic. It's a lot of logic. Okay, because you could say, do you ever see the movie The Village with M. Night Shyamalan's movie The Village? Do you ever see that?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
It's all about this civilization, this villages, I suppose, and you can't go past this forest, because if you go past this forest, it's haunted.
Yeah.
Well, all that they hid from everybody was that Earth was out there, and there was a whole civilization out there, and they hid it from everybody. They planted the idea in the head to control people. You know what I mean? And so, I mean, it's the same thing that happened with COVID. No matter what side of the fence you were on with COVID, you believed something. You either believed what, the big news station said on the left side, or what the news station said on the right side. It's all spin. It's all PR. It's all getting ideas into your head. So it can be utilized, make populaces do stuff, make people do stuff. In the case of an artist, right? I know amazing artists, that are selling their work for like $500, and you're like, God, that had to take you forever. And it's amazing. It's like, oh yeah, $500. Like, God. And then you'll see some slop put up by somebody, and it'll get auctioned for $15 million. Right? Well, what's the difference? PR. PR is the difference. Gagosian or somebody put him out there as the next hot thing. This is the next big investment grade artist, and it puts him out there. Well, that gives the value. What gave the value? It wasn't the art piece. It was the PR. It's the thought behind it, right? iPhones and Androids. Well, there's different thoughts you have behind those. People think about like, oh, what do you think about an Android person? Well, they have a thought about an Android person, and they didn't put it there. Somebody put it there. What are iPhone people like Apple people?
Do you have a thought there? Let me guess. You own an iPhone.
Yeah, I'm a Mac iPhone guy, 100%.
Yeah, okay. This is so Apple did a great job, because I also said the iPhone is more the luxury product under this amongst the smartphones, and the Android version is more for the average person, cheap, affordable. You can use it sometimes better in technology, but it's cheap, so it's basically not as expensive as an iPhone. Which,
look, is in terms of hardware, I don't know. I'm not a hardware guy. In terms of software, for me, Apple is just, it's funny because you're right. That is sort of the consensus of like people. It's a more upper class product or whatever. But for me, it was just up and downtime. Windows stuff, which I used to be on, just had so much downtime and all this garbage. So I went completely over to Mac. For me, it was function. But your point is, yeah, that's right. So your point is very well stated, though. I mean, we all think stuff about it. Well, where'd the thought come from? You can control this, and that's PR. It's just interjecting a thought about something.
That's really interesting. When you talk about Apple, I mean, the reason why I got the Apple iPod, I think it was about 20 years ago or 18 years ago, was that the iPod, I loved running back then. So, and the iPod was the first one with sufficient storage that I can store many songs on an iPod and take it with me for running. So it was a small device with a lot of songs on it. And I think the other MP3 players had limited space. This got me into Apple. And then I had a problem when I wanted to go running. We got the mobile phones. I had to take the mobile phone with me, the iPod with me, and it was a lot to carry while running. When Steve Jobs then introduced the iPhone the first time, it was quite clear. I mean, the use case was for me, I don't need the iPod anymore when I go running, so I just need to carry the phone with me. And years later, I heard someone say, okay, you must be rich because you have an iPhone. So and this is then in your definition PR. So someone
Absolutely
planted
PR.
the picture in another mind that everybody who has an iPhone is a rich person.
Yeah, and you know, you never hear Apple use that PR campaign. This is the phone for the rich person. You never hear them say that. But somebody put that out there, and it could have been them. It could have been some backdoor campaign they had to spread it through communities. And maybe it was just a simple price thing. Maybe they're like, well, if we just price our product $250 more than the other one, people will say that about us already. Is it $250 worth more of hardware, of labor? I don't know. I think they're probably all using similar shops in China. I mean, you know, these aren't built in America or where you're at. I mean, is it really that much more value? I don't know. So I mean, it's a thought that's produced, and then that thought produces the value. It's like these bored apes, right? These NFTs. Well, there's no intrinsic value in an NFT about a bored ape. It's a piece of art. Well, what gave it all this value? Why are people spending so much money on these bored apes? PR. They've interjected a thought. And what's the thought? It has value. First of all, I don't even think they look that cool. It's not my style of art, but it is a lot of people's style of art, and that's cool for them, right? But it's not my thing. So why would I buy it? One, it has equity. I could buy it this and then sell it for that. That's PR. Somebody said, oh, you're gonna buy it for this and you can sell it for this, or it's going to be a good store of value. This NFT is going to be a good store of value. These will be worth something. Still PR. That idea is still coming across. Bitcoin. What do people think about Bitcoin? That's what Michael Saylor publicizes all the time. It's a store of value, which is a great, simple way and concise way to put it. You know, Bitcoin is the digital gold. PR. Oh, now I think Bitcoin is the digital gold. PR. Putting an idea into somebody's head, and then they spit it out to everybody else. And now you have word of mouth. It's all PR. So it's a very great tool to understand. I love the PR world. I love PR books. I love marketing and advertising books as well. But PR in and of itself is just fascinating because it travels so naturally. But the phrase I said earlier is something that everybody in your audience should really take to heart, which is PR plants the seed, marketing waters the crop. If you don't have PR and you start to spend your advertising and marketing budget, you will literally burn your cash, literally burn it. You got to have something to think about. So, you know, there's a story I heard about Michael Jackson in the 90s, okay, from somebody who I won't say who it's from, okay, but they knew him directly, all right, and it was one of the only people that was in this particular industry allowed into his wedding. And this is when he married Lisa Marie Presley, okay? So he had all these crazy things going on. It was Wacko the Jacko, you know, pedophile, you know, remember the baby hanging out the window? I think that was in Italy or something. And but the thing is he said to this person that he would rather be known all over the world for whatever, anything, rather than not known. And then what was funny is he would time certain releases. It would be some big thing, some big crazy thing that would happen, and then a greatest hits album would come out or something. You know, so everybody knew who he was. It was just, it's free press, it's free publicity. And you know, as crazy as some of these things might seem, that people still sell. Who's that director, the pedophile director from Europe? He did Rosemary's Roman Polanski.
Oh yeah, really.
Yeah, remember Roman Polanski? So
he's pedophile.
Oh yeah, he can't even come back into the United States. Oh yeah, go read Roman Polanski's background. So the guy was in trouble. I won't say what on the show, but if anybody wants to read Roman Polanski's background, you're going to find some pretty dark stuff. Ooh. But he did Rosemary's Baby. His wife was his wife was the one that was murdered by the Manson family in his home.
Mm.
Sharon Tate, So this guy's got this really dark history. Can't even come legally back into the United States because of his pedophilic charges, I suppose you'd say, in the United States. Yet he's consistently worked in the movie business ever since. The guy's a great artist. I've seen his movies. I'm like, they're good. The guy's he gets good screenplays. He does good stories. I like his stuff. He's done some really interesting stuff. But he's kind of a wacko. It just goes to show, like, what happens in the PR world and what happens in the sales world and all this stuff. It's a really interesting thing to try to figure out how to navigate. So with your audience, there's a lot of business people there, and they're in
Scientists.
pharmaceuticals
So
and scientists. It's
we
different.
We were talking about big names. So, for example, Miley Cyrus, big star.
Say that one.
Miley Cyrus, big star, is a big star.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson, a big star. Apple, a big brand, a big company. And in my audience, I have a lot of scientists with small businesses. And basically, what they do is take scientific ideas, turn them into products, and sell them to the pharma industry. And I can imagine that some might say, why should I need PR? What is in it for me? What is your opinion on PR for science? Is it necessary or for product
It's necessary for
science?
everybody. There is not one person on this planet that couldn't benefit from understanding the technology of PR. Even like you, right? Or like me as an artist. Like, I want PR because it helps me sell my art, and that's what I love to do, right? You want to grow your podcast following. Well, you need PR for that. Why would anybody follow you? You know what I mean? Well, they got to think something. And I'm going to tell you what they're not going to listen to is 90 seconds of you telling them why. The scientist could have the greatest product on earth, but nobody's going to listen to him for 5 minutes and say why, right? It doesn't travel. PR travels on rapid, short things. It's I could take almost any subject, and we could come up with what do you think about it? Well, it's always something short, succinct, instantly understandable. You have an instant thought about it. It could go like this. Let's do a test with like me eating an ice cream cone, right? I'm eating this ice cream cone, and you go, "How is it?" And I go, "It's good." Do you think anything? No, you don't think anything, because I haven't related it to you in any way. And that's one of the concepts of PR is you have to relate it to somebody with something that they already know. So if you say, "How's the ice cream?" and I go, "It's good. It's kind of like peanut butter chocolate." See, now you know what peanut butter and chocolate tastes like. And now you have a concept of what this ice cream tastes like without even having trying the ice cream. See what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a little bit of the PR tech right there. It's taking it and changing it or relating it to something that you already know. Okay. And, a scientist, for example, having a product, well, he's got a solution for something. It's not just a pill to mimic another pill. There's got to be some angle, some sort of spin, some sort of solved problem. And then he's got to take whatever the problem is over here that he has solved and then relate that to that particular thing. And I'm going to tell you, I don't care how smart people are. I don't care how intelligent they are, how high their IQs are, if they're readers or not readers, digital people or book people. Your time span to get into somebody's head and interest them is now seconds. That is the world that you live in. You have seconds, right? And it's
how many in your opinion?
Like 5. I mean, I'm telling you, people's attention spans for
it's the
interest
TikTok world. So it's 5 seconds, and I saw it on my TikTok. I think every video got about 5 to 10 seconds view time, and then I thought, okay, my video sucks, so nobody watches my videos. And then I talked to other creators and research on the internet. It seems to be the attention span that we have right now, 5 to 10 seconds, and it's really rare that people spend more time on a video.
The funny thing is I don't even know that it's any different than 50 years ago. I really don't know that. That maybe people's attention spans were 5 to 10 seconds 50 years ago, but they were more polite. There was less to do. So you had to focus on it more or something, like it's kind of like this. Let's say I'm a musician. Okay. Ask me what kind of music I do. And then when I'm answering, you tell me how long it takes for you to be bored with what I'm saying. Okay. And I'm not going to try to be boring. So ask me what kind of music I like.
What kind of music do you like?
I should say.
Yeah. What kind of music do you like?
Well, what I write as a musician is I write music that's, it's a rock-based music, and we have really good 4/4 rhythm drum beats that people really can get into and you can really groove.
Okay.
And then I do a very melodic bass lines that are
I,
very memorable.
I think I have a phone call coming in.
That's right.
So let's
You
talk
check
next
out
week.
right. You check out right away,
Mm.
right? Now ask me that same question again. What kind of music do you write?
What kind of music do you write?
Well, it's kind of like a mix between Metallica and Jane's Addiction. Or I could say it's kind of like a mix between David Bowie and Guns N' Roses.
Really? Yeah.
See what I mean? So now I've gotten into your head right away. I didn't say shit about what I do. I didn't say anything and describe it. You haven't heard it, but I just gave you two things that you already relate to that are different. And you go, God, David Bowie, Guns N' Roses mix, or a Metallica, Jane's Addiction mix. If you've heard those two bands, see, you already relate to them. And you go, God, that's interesting.
And I have a feeling towards
That's
the
right.
bands, and I have an emotion because either I like it or I don't like it. So it's
just fast communication, right? Happens in the dating world, happens in the marriage world. Like if somebody wants to set you up with a girl, right? Like on a date, what are the first things that a guy's going to ask the friend? You're going to have a few things that you're going to ask right away, and they're going to be the same things. It's not really, like what's her personality. That's what you find out in the first date. You're going to ask certain things, and those things are going to travel, right? For women, there's the kind of joke about, women don't date short guys or whatever, right? And guys have their own concept of this, and you'll hear different aspects of that, and it's not 10 for 10 true, but these things do travel. Stereotypes, racist stereotypes, or I won't even say racist stereotypes. I'm just going to say stereotypes of culture, people, race, all this stuff. Anybody can get all sensitive about what they want, but there's white people stereotypes, there's black people stereotypes, there's Jewish stereotypes, there's Christian stereotypes. They all exist if you just confront that they exist. Well, why do they exist? Well, there may be some semblance of truth to it. I'm not saying that they're always true, but a stereotype is also PR. A stereotype is a thought in the mind.
Mm-hmm.
See what I mean? So that's all my whole point is that no matter what you do, if you're a scientist, a business person, an artist, or whatever, whether you realize it or not, you live in a PR world, and all of these thoughts are all flying around, and they were created by somebody. Like back in the Nazi days, go look at what the thoughts they were producing about the Jews. They're horrible. Pictures of them with rat faces and stuff. And they were publicizing this to a whole populace. It's like the meanest shit you've ever seen. I mean, it is true evil, but it was publicized. And I'm sure in parts of the world, it is still a thought. I mean, that's how hardcore PR works. It's probably still a thought with people. And of course, those ages are probably dying off as the new generations come in. But you get the idea. It gets away from morals, ethics, right and wrong. None of that matters. It's just what stuck.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So you have to separate it out. And you can always tell a good PR person, because they're not really interested in, well, it's wrong to think that. Okay, I agree that it's wrong to think that, but I'm interested in why it stuck. That's a good PR person, is they're looking, why did that stick in the mind? What was said? Was it short? Was it fast? What did it relate to? What did it relate to in the person's history? Why did they resonate with it? I get interested in all sorts of stuff like that instead of the humanity of it, because we can all turn into moral judges on our own time. But when you really want to study about success in PR, you start looking at things like that. If you were going to say who's the biggest actor in the world, who would you say your maybe top actors that come to mind are?
The problem is, after the Oscar nights, the first actor that pops in my mind is Will Smith, basically.
Will Smith, isn't that the funniest thing? Now, by revenue, is he? No. I think by revenue, it's probably like, Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Cruise. And I think Mel Gibson is still pretty up there because of that Passion of the Christ thing. He really killed on that one. But, but Will Smith is the top on everybody's mind. Now, why? Because he was on every news channel and you heard the slap, had nothing to do with his talent, had nothing to do with his movies' revenues. And maybe Hollywood will get on the back of that. Maybe they'll be like, hey, love him or hate him, he's the star of our next film, and it'll probably be successful.
That's an interesting point of view. And if you don't have the moral or ethical angle to tackle, like, was it good or was it bad what he did? It's just PR.
Yeah.
Everybody
you just look at it for what it is. Now, let's say that it didn't really happen. Let's say that it wasn't planned. Okay.
Mm.
And I'm not saying it was planned. I don't know. I didn't watch the Oscars. I haven't watched the Oscars probably since I was a teenager, to tell you the truth. But I don't watch the Oscars. But let's say that it wasn't planned, right? Still PR. Still put a thought in your head. You think Will's a dick, or you think Chris Rock went too far with his jokes. You think something. And all of those thoughts can then be garnered and utilized. You know?
But this is basically also important for, sorry to changing the topic a little bit more,
okay.
back to science, but this is also important for scientists. When you think about, for example, COVID, the story behind BioNTech, do you know the story behind BioNTech? How they became successful?
How biotech became successful?
BioNTech, it was the company that licensed the vaccine, their COVID vaccine to Pfizer. So they started back in 2008, got one family office interested, were close to bankruptcy a couple of times. And then they really used the fear for COVID against the SARS-CoV-2 infection to use their technology to produce a vaccine as a solution to that. But the thing is, before we had this COVID situation, they chased money. And their technology, the mRNA technology before COVID was not, let's say, it hasn't found its PR yet. Let's call it that way. So the difficult thing, I guess, for scientists is when they need a lot of money, like BioNTech needed about 500 million to bring it to a point where the company is in a situation to produce a vaccine like they did at scale. So they raised the money, I think, up to 2019, which was 500 million. And they had a lot of competition on the market. So PR is also relevant for them then, because what they need to do is to create something in an investor's mind that makes the investor think about the company. So if it's just a boring scientific presentation that doesn't stand out, and like you did before with what music do we write? Okay, we make this and that and this music, or you start relating it to the world of the investor. Is also relevant for scientists. They have a lot of competition on the market still. So everything outside mRNA technology and vaccine development is still a world in which a lot of science exists, scientific ideas, but limited money. And such a world is perfect for PR then, because the scientists who understand to make their concept sticky in the mind wins at the end of the day.
Well, it's something you hear in any industry, is that people are like, well, I don't want to deal with marketing or advertising. I just want to do the product development, and I love getting into the product development. I don't want to get into the rest of it. You just got to face facts. If you're into any product development, I mean, service or product, drug or music, I don't care what it is, whatever you do, if you are ignoring the fact that you're insufficient on your PR and your knowledge of PR, you're going to lose the game. Okay. If you have a great team, you can afford a great team, that's great. I mean, in my industries, I've never been able to put together these amazing teams and afford these amazing teams. I had to learn it all myself and develop it myself. So maybe a lot of people that are listening can do that, but you're really creating a weak spot to not understand this technology. And you know, 3 or 4 books and you're going to become somewhat conversant in it. It's just, you know, why run a race with shackles on your feet? You know what I mean? Like, take the shackles off, you know, like really run the race. There's another word that is in the PR world that you should know now, that you may know this, your audience may know this, but it's a word called noise. It's a pretty specialized term in the PR world. Noise, by definition, is confusion caused to the person on the other end, the consumer, by too many messages coming across at once. Okay, so if you're only marketed, you know, Vodafone or AT&T as this phone service, you're like, oh yeah, great. Well, what if you had 25 of them marketing to you? Causes confusion on the other end of the thing. Now, one of the things that's interesting is you got to look at the product of that confusion. So, and this could go for somebody who has a product that they need to raise venture capital for or whatever, because who's on the other end of your receiving line there? You know, imagine how many people are trying to get to a venture capitalist to get their cash. A lot, right? So noise is, again, confusion caused by too many messages coming across to the recipient point at once. And so that confusion causes inactivity. That's the critical thing, right? They don't do anything. They don't make a choice between the 25 people. They just don't do anything. So the critical aspect of PR is, how do you break through the noise? How do you How do you get through all of the other stuff and become that new little different thing that they see? They go, oh, for some reason I noticed this guy.
Do you have a
Right?
secret method
To
break through?
I don't know
the
that I have a
noise?
secret. I don't know if I have a secret method. I mean, I'm a very studied person on the subject of PR, and again for business and art, because let's take me as an artist, for example. Okay. There's pop art, there's there's all these different forms of art. There's impressionism. I could throw out probably 100 different terms for what kind of artist you are, right? But if I want to become more noticed, right? Like if I say to you, like we talked about this, I think on a call we did, you and I did, and you said, well, I think you said, like, what kind of artist are you? An abstract artist. Well, let's say I said I'm an abstract artist. Nobody ever will remember me. There's a gazillion abstract artists. I'm going to tell you, in any city I go to, there's more abstract artists than any other type of art. And I'm not taking away from their skill or whatever, right? But what kind of abstract artists were remembered? Okay, there's guys like Gerhard Richter. If you ever study him, this guy would take these trowels and drag paint across the thing and do these. Some of them are really amazing, huge. Well, that guy is remembered. Why? Out of all the other abstract artists, he wasn't the first. I guess you could say, I won't say Damien Hirst is an abstract artist. Damien Hirst, one of arguably the richest living artists alive. Well, he was a minimalist. He was doing dots. I think the last stat I heard is he'd sold like 22,000 of these dot paintings, like crazy numbers. Okay, and I think the guy's like a billionaire now. Well, okay, so what did he do that made him stand out? He just did these dots. Everybody's like, oh yeah, the dot paintings, and I'm sure there's a lot more to it than that. I think the guy's a brilliant marketer, by the way. I think he's brilliant at what he does. Big fan of him from a business perspective and how he's grown his corporation, so to speak. I'm a big fan of him. But you got to really look at, like, well, how did they get through there? What did they say that was different? So there's a lot of things you could do. You could shock. You could pull, like in the 90s, like a Marilyn Manson, where he shocked everybody with how horrifying he was. Or you could do, like, if we get into the drug world, like, what drugs do you remember? Why do you remember them? Why did it stick into your mind?
Currently, Elon Musk, 420, the price he put for Twitter.
Yeah.
So which is 54.20. He seems to be into marijuana, I guess. So it's
yeah. Maybe, I don't know if the guy's a stoner or a pothead or what he is, but I mean, maybe that was a big significant thing.
There was a huge discussion on the internet. So when I read the news about Elon Musk placing an offer for Twitter, a lot of people pointed out it's 420. So it's 420. This I learned it's the perfect time to smoke a joint. So 420.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. Well, like with Elon Musk too, let's even say, like, how did he penetrate the market? He wasn't the first to do electric cars here. General Motors, they did a car in the 90s called the EV. I think it was called the EV something or another. And it was a total failure, total flop. And then they shit canned the whole thing and then just scrapped all the cars. I mean, the American car companies had all the opportunities and technology to do what Musk was successful at. But now when you think, but if you think about with being first, now you think American Electric, Tesla. I mean, it's just Tesla. He not only took it over, he became the first name. I mean, it showed up in his, his stock value. And, there's recently, Musk was a little bit pissed off at Biden. I won't say he was pissed off, but they asked him, like, what do you think about Biden? And he was giving out all these awards for, electric vehicles and forging the path. And he'd given all these awards to Ford and General Motors. And he goes, yeah, he didn't mention us anywhere, even though we're the ones selling them all. And Ford and General Motors are so far behind the curve. So it was kind of a funny thing that he was upset about, and rightly so. But PR wise, you think American electric vehicle, you don't think Ford. It's Tesla. He's already owned it. See, so it just takes logic and examination.
Not only in America. I think electric vehicles currently is Tesla. So it's I think it's the first brand that comes to mind when the discussion is about EVs. I also thought, while you were speaking about Apple, the smartphone, I mean, I just thought what would have happened? How would the world look like if Steve Jobs started his presentation in 2006, where he presented the iPhone of 2007, with yeah, now we have another mobile phone. We invented another mobile phone. Yeah, we know you have already 800 possibilities to buy one. Now you have 801 possibilities. Do you think Apple is Steve Jobs was a genius in PR?
Brilliant. Even, you know, I don't want to get into too much of his history of how he was bought out of the company in the I think it was like 91 or whatever, where they pinched him out, and then the company kind of went down, and then he came back and brought it all back. But let's talk about when he came back. Okay. So if you looked at PCs back then, okay, let's go back to like say 1994. If you looked at PCs in 96, PCs were very dull, gray bricks, computer bricks. They weren't attractive at all. And desktop computers just looked like a stupid tower with drawers in it. Okay. And then what did he do? He came out with these computers that were colorful, and he put all the aesthetics into it. Now, was it a better OS than Microsoft? I don't know. You know, I was a kid back then. I don't know. Was it more expensive and all these other factors? Who knows? But I can tell you what, it was different than what everybody else was producing. And again, it came up and they were more expensive. So people are like, oh, these people must be rich because they have a Mac. Right. And so when it comes to like PR for things like the iPod, the guy was definitely a visionary. Okay. And how he used PR beyond vision, I think those are potentially crossing a chasm into a different subject. Like, what's a visionary versus a PR person? You know, a visionary was going to come up with a concept of something that doesn't exist. And that's not necessarily a PR thing. Maybe it comes from a PR thing of seeing what people need. But, you know, a lot of these visionaries, they're observing the market and what it needs, and they come up with something. But some of them just come up with it. They're like, I'm going to do this, and everybody's going to take it, and they're going to like it, and this is the next great thing. Some of them are successful at that vision. Some of them are not. I'd like to say that it's all based on PR, but I'm sure it's not all based on successful PR, right? So I won't say that he's a brilliant PR person. I'm sure he is, but I would say that if I was going to put my opinion on it, I would say his success more came because he was just a hyper visionary, a futurist, and like, you know, remember when the iPad came out? I think it was like 2009 or 2010 or something.
Somewhere around the time.
Yeah, I just was like, it's like a big iPhone. I thought it was dumb, personally. I was like, and again, what do I know? You know, I'm a consumer of his products now, like, and I have an iPad, so clearly I was somewhat behind the curve on this. But I was like, is this going to be a real thing? If people want a computer, a laptop, you know, like a laptop, a desktop, a phone, and an iPad, are they going to really want that? And I was like, I don't know. Well, the answer clearly was yes, you know, because you go into anybody's house now, they have an iPad, they have an iPhone, they have a Mac. That's visionary stuff right there, man. I mean, this guy was just like, no, we're going to do this. And, you know, and I'm sure he thought at some point this is going to replace, you know, towers, and it's going to replace laptops. It hasn't totally yet, but you can see that it's going to. At some point, those operating systems, the mobile operating systems, are going to bypass desktop operating systems and laptops for workflow and all that.
Especially in science, I think you definitely need a vision, because people need to change something to find an investor. So just going mainstream and say, now we produce the 1000 first version of something doesn't stick with investors anyways. So definitely need a vision. But the second thing is you need to sell the vision. And I think your PR angle is great, because with this limited attention span of investors, before the pandemic, I had the opinion that it's 2 minutes, 36 seconds that I have to convince an investor to agree to a second meeting. Now I'm more at the 5 to 10 seconds. And this is the angle that PR brings in. So just sit down and think how you can hook a person on an idea, how you can make your idea stick in their heads. I think this is also important for scientists who want to sell something to investors at the end of the day, because without this PR upfront, selling doesn't work. In my opinion.
No. What's your opinion on that? Go look at any good pitch deck. You know, I mean, these scientists and all these guys you're talking about, these guys have created pitch decks, and go look at them. Okay. I've seen a lot of pitch decks in my day, and they're hilarious because some of them are like just screenplays, and you're just like, ah, I can't even read this thing, right? I had one guy send me one. They were doing coin dredging off the coast of Florida for like pirate ship coins. They had this whole business plan, and they wanted all this money. It's kind of cool, really, but I couldn't get through like a couple of pages of this thing. Okay, and then I had one that I did invest in where it was basically like infographic, bullet point, infographic, bullet point, relatable problem, relatable solve, something I knew. It was super smart, super fast. I got through pages of this thing, like you said, minutes, instantly knew what they did, instantly knew the problem they were solving. You know, it gets a little more complex when you're talking about return on your investment and when it pays out, or what is this going to be a long-term equity play or a cash flow. It gets a little more complicated when you get into that stuff. But in terms of understanding, minutes, and they really broke through the noise, as we said earlier, just by being clear and comprehensible, right? So that's another thing today that I think is really undervalued, is especially with engineers, comprehensibility and clarity should be top of your mind. For example, I like German cars a lot. I think German cars just have this driving dynamic that I really enjoy. But I had an Audi a few years ago, about 4 years ago. Okay, and this was one of the first Audis that had that kind of entertainment center in front of your, right behind your steering wheel. I mean, there was like folder drives in there. You had this circle wheel thing, and you could like write letters on it with your finger, and like, and it was just super slow, by the way. It's kind of cool that you can write a letter and it shows up in your dashboard. And then it was like this navigation thing, this wheel, and it clicks, but it had like folders like a Windows operating system. And I was like, why in God's name do I want folders? I mean, when I drive a sports car, you know what I want to pay attention to? Not that. You know, I want to go fast. I want a visceral experience. I want just speed. I want clarity. I want to feel the car. I want to feel the road. I want to be in communication with the wind and the road and the sky. I don't want to be messing around with a bunch of folders. See, this was where the engineers there, I'm sure it's brilliant. I'm sure these guys are brilliant, but they lost contact, right? Their vision went way out of there. They should have had some guy like me come in and be like, hey guys, you guys are just brilliant, but no. Cut it off.
I think this was the angle that also Steve Jobs brought into Apple. I saw a presentation, I think it was from 2000 something, 2001 or 2002, where he said that a lot of companies have great engineers, they produce great products, but they forget about the customer. And this is something that he said Apple is now doing differently. We start our thought process with the customer experience and work then backwards to the product, and not do it the other way like the German companies. I mean, German products are famous for being well engineered, let's face it, so nothing else. And so I'm not surprised to hear that you had this customer experience with a German car that was basically well engineered, probably, but not really thought through.
Yeah. And again, it's brilliant. And, you know, just to the point of what you're saying earlier, where how does like somebody who's a scientist who's doing product development think with a lot of this stuff, right? And one of the things you'll hear again in anything is that everything's already been done. It's all been done before. All the angles are done. Everything's been said. Well, that's bullshit. There's always an angle. There's always something new. There's always a new niche. There's always a new micro niche. You know, you asked my strategy, by the way. It's just niching and micro niching. You know, that's how you build a platform. Find an area that you're in, find your niche, find your micro niche, zero in there, take over the market on that, and then you have a platform to build into other things, or you can just become the market dominator for that particular thing that you're in. That's my simple strategy that's worked wonderfully for me for my whole life, with the understanding of PR. But like taking the cars thing, for example, you know, because everybody sort of understands cars. Everybody has a car, okay? Well, in the sports car world, it became speed. So now you have these ridiculous cars that they're all 200, you know, you go buy a supercar, they're all 200-mile-an-hour plus cars. How many places can you go over 200 miles an hour where you live?
Not many, there's one. So
yeah, I think we have to go out to like the desert in the United States, okay? And then it's still illegal because they have planes flying over with radars that track you, you know?
No, it's in Austria, it's a racetrack. So it's basically 2 hours drive from my house. You can rent a racetrack basically, and that's it. So, but other than that, you can't use it.
Yeah. So now technology is so incredible. They're producing cars that are super fast.
Mm,
Everybody, Ferrari comes out with a faster one, Porsche comes out with a faster one, McLaren comes out with a faster one, Bugatti comes out with a faster one. Now it's just ridiculous. Okay. So obviously you can't beat that niche anymore. Okay.
mm,
Some new guy, you're not going to be able to produce what Bugatti, built a whatever, how, I don't know how much a factory was, call it $250 million factory to produce that $2 million 1,000 foot-pound of torque sports car. You can't do that. So there's like a new trend in America with sports cars, though. And I won't say it's a new trend, and I won't say it's nostalgia either, but it's the driving experience.
mm,
It's not even speed anymore. It's not 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. I mean, Tesla has completely destroyed that game for everybody. I mean, you go buy a Tesla and it's 2.2 seconds on a car that's $140,000,
mm,
and you're just
mm,
like, and you can seat a family of 5 in there. It's crazy speeds. So like in America, like for example, with you can go buy old air-cooled Porsches. Well, they do 0 to 60 in 5 and 7 seconds. They're not that fast, but you're connected.
mm,
See what I mean? Now you're
mm,
connected to the vehicle. Different niche.
mm, mm,
Okay. And now there's car, and then all these cars, you can make transmissions on a car that shift way faster than you could ever humanly shift a stick shift and a clutch yourself. So then a lot of these supercar companies, including Porsche, which was known for stick shifts, is like the love of their audience. They moved away from it just to compete with the other guys in the speed. Well, who complained? All the guys who love a stick shift. You see, speed wasn't the number one thing for them anymore.
mm, mm.
So I'm not saying that they've corrected this necessarily, because a lot of Porsches you can't buy in stick shift at all on these new models. I mean, I don't even know that they make one. They might make maybe a touring one or something like that. So then what happens is all these old Porsches start getting swept up for crazy dollar amounts, and not because of the speed factor, because how it makes you feel all around, right?
Mhm.
And so all I'm saying is that there's always an angle. Society changes. In the watch world, I'm a big watch fan. Okay. Mechanical watches were all but decimated by digital watches in the 70s. Okay. And so even companies like Patek Philippe and um, you know Rolex, they were coming out with quartz watches, and these guys were mechanical watch wizards, right? So then it changed again. Well, now that everything's electronic, what's cool? Mechanical watches with gears that wind up.
Mhm.
That's cool again. See what I mean? So it just takes everybody to pay attention, look around, don't think with stupid thoughts like it's all been done before, it's all been said before. No, things change, right? There's a whole generation of people, and I'm sure in like, I would say that it's got maybe millennials and older. They're just sick of technology,
Mhm.
right? And I can't even peg an age, but they're just sick of technology. They do trips without their phones and without their computers. They find reasons to be unplugged. There's a whole wave of people who want to be off the grid completely,
Mhm.
right? There's always some angle, some niche. And if you niche and micro niche and find the actual need or create the need, you're gonna figure things out pretty successfully. It just takes
Noticed.
a lot
I,
of observation and logic.
I completely agree with that. It's the same with scientists that I have to deal with. It's when they have the idea to turn their science into products, the first angle they get is we want to solve all problems of the world at the
Right.
same time,
Yeah.
which is just very broad. So mRNA, for example, you can use it for vaccines, you can use it in oncology, and you can use it for drug delivery and other things. But for a company, it's just a too broad angle. And then I think we come into this problem that you mentioned before, this noise. So you don't stand out of the noise because you are too big. But
Yeah.
when scientists use your technique and say, okay, what is my niche? What is the micro niche in the niche? And we just
Mhm.
focus on that first. And when we generate cash flows with that niche, then we can broaden out. It's also, I
Mhm.
think, also something that scientists can do. Let me ask you one question about an Austrian product and your first thought when I mention it.
Okay.
What is it? Red Bull.
Red Bull.
Mm?
You want to know my honest first thought with that? And keep in mind, I'm American.
Yeah,
Is
go ahead.
alcohol additive?
A
First
Red
thought.
Bull? Really?
Red Bull. Red Bull.
Red Bull, yeah,
Al-
yeah, this
First thing I think about is alcohol additive, because I hear it more used for mixing with alcohol in
really.
the United States than any. I don't know anybody that drinks it for an energy drink, but I do know people who drink it I guess you can, I'm not a huge alcohol guy, but that's what I know of is people mix Red Bull with alcohol. Like energy drinks in the United States, you've
Mhm.
got Monster is number one. Like the guys who drink these giant energy drinks are
Yeah.
like, Monster. We get Red Bull, you don't really hear that much of like that. At least I don't.
Okay, so Monster is more popular in the United States than Red Bull, basically.
In terms of
It's
an energy drink,
Mhm,
yeah.
mhm.
It's
But
very
for
much,
mixing, okay, this
very
is
much,
interesting.
yeah. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, yeah,
That's,
this is
yeah.
I didn't expect that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure
It's
if you talk to 10 Americans, I'm sure you'll hear, quite a few different answers, but that's me. I live in downtown Nashville too, which is very touristy, kind of like a miniature Las Vegas, tons of tourists locations, lots of bars. So that might be influenced by that. And if you get
Mhm.
into maybe a more typical city like a New York or Chicago, your answer may be very different. But that's why you survey. That's why you ask people, you know?
Do we have a couple of minutes? I would like to ask you
Yeah,
one
of course.
final block of questions because it's really
Sure.
interesting chatting with you and listening to your expertise, especially in the PR and advertising world. Modern technology. So we have now the pandemic. Everybody went digital. I know there are some people who wants to be off the grid, but it changed a lot. What's your opinion on new technology? Like, for example, we are on a podcast. You are sitting in Florida. I'm in Vienna. We are having a conversation. It was not possible 10 years ago.
Mhm.
How relevant are things like podcasts, video blogs, blogging platforms, writing platforms for PR? How important are these platforms like YouTube, Medium, Buzzsprout, for example, that I use for distributing my podcast? Should everybody think about being on a podcast, doing a podcast, doing a video blog, or is it something where you say, okay, it has its time and now it's over and we are going off the grid right now?
I won't go so far as to say it's had its time or anything like that, but I do think about like the fact where you live in a bit of a let's call it a tribal world, all
Mm.
right, where everybody wants to be part of something, everybody wants to fit in, everybody wants to conform to something, and not conform as be like a follower, but everybody, you want to be part of something, you want to have a family, you want to have friends, you want to be this, you want to. There's bikers that are bikers because they're bikers, and then there's tennis guys who are tennis guys that hang out with tennis guys. There's watch guys, you know what I mean? There's
Mm.
everybody has their thing. So, but even if you take YouTube, YouTube is a platform, is a platform. I guess that's the brilliant thing, is that YouTube is the number one branded video platform. But when you get into it, it's not really YouTube that you're looking for. You're looking for channels to follow eventually. You look for videos and maybe you're goofing around in videos and others, but you're looking for eventually you find channels that are really resonate with what you watch and you start to follow those channels. See, now you found a niche. See what I mean? Blogging and if you want to read a great book, go read a book by Ryan Holiday. It's called it's something. I'm lying. I'll come up with the name of it in a second. Anyway, Ryan Holiday's book. It's something. I'm lying. Sorry, Ryan. But it's a fantastic book, but I forget the title.
I have this one to offer.
Which one is that one?
This one is yeah.
No, it's not that one.
It's
calling. No, it's damn it, what's the name? Anyway, you guys will have it's something. I'm lying by Ryan Holiday. It's just a great book where it talks about how all the news stations were picking up all their news from little bloggers. There'd be these little blog stations that were like the cutting edge, and then they would feed up the command channel to the major news sources, whether it was true or not. Right. And podcasts, let's talk about the power of podcasts, right? Anybody can create a podcast. And so now there's a lot of competition for viewership or whatever. And what do? They niche out into their podcasts. They niche out into their areas. They micro niche into their areas. And if anybody disbelieves the power of podcasting now, just go look at all of the trouble that what's his name? I'm brain farting on all these guys' names right now. The guy who was just getting in trouble because he was putting out all this alternative medicine stuff. The biggest podcaster alive, damn it. The MMA guy.
Yeah, you mean you mean the Spotify deal guy.
Yeah, exactly. I can't believe I'm brain farting on this guy. I'm apologizing to him publicly right now.
Me too.
But he was getting in all this.
Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan. Thank you so much.
No,
yeah, if anybody disbelieves the power of podcasting and where it's at as a platform, I mean, why does that guy pick up so much flack for what he says? It's a communication channel. Communication channels change. Communication channels get more direct. And that's what I love about technology. So if you're asking my opinion on technology, instant and directness are there going to be two keywords. Instantaneous, we practically already have. We're talking in two different countries across the planet, and it's amazing. And we're talking in real time with no lag, okay, on a platform on computers. This is really, really incredible stuff.
How does that work? I mean, it's a long distance between Austria and Florida. I think there's an ocean in between, and there are a lot of satellites, but I don't experience any lag in any conversation. It was different 10 years ago. Do you have a clue how they do it to overcome the perception of a lag?
A little bit. I was in telecom for a little bit, so you start to learn a little bit about what they do, and it's just incredible what these engineers come up with, and the consumer drives it with speed. I mean, we're so picky, there's great Louis C.K. jokes about this, like, when you're irritated about slow phones, and he's like, chill out, it's going to space and back, relax. But I think that the we're just going to see more and more of that instantaneous, where for finances and communication, I mean, right now we're already with that, with no borders, but finances, Bitcoin and all these cryptos are really breaking the borders of finance. And I think that really messes with the central banking systems and Bank of International Settlements and, IMF and all these financial systems. They're all worried about how that's going to impact them. I mean, we had Hillary Clinton saying stuff about that. And she's, this is going to undermine the US dollar, which is a little bit of a weird thing because the US dollar is the international backing currency. So that if that gets impacted, that impacts everybody's currency, and the change is going to be inevitable. How it happens, I don't know. My guess is as good as yours. But it's
when I look at finance, I mean, when we switch the topic back to finance,
sorry, I bounced like that.
No problem. No problem. I liked it. I mean, it's a podcast anyway, so we'll do timestamps so everybody can then go to this part of the conversation they want to listen to. In finance, for me, it's quite logical. I mean, Bitcoin is well accepted meanwhile, so it has its community, which makes it rather safe. Volatility, I'm not so much worried about because, I mean, we also see for currencies the high inflation rate. So, I mean, it doesn't matter to me as a finance guy whether a currency goes up and down or whether Bitcoin goes up and down. It's just an asset that you put on the balance sheet. The only thing that worried me was that at some point in time, it loses all its value, but I think we are past that, at least with Bitcoin. So I don't believe that at any given point in time, the technology will become worthless. The biggest use case I see for huge corporations, so like merger acquisition, is large transactions. When I use the banking system, I think it's still slow. It was slow 20 years ago when it was a merger acquisition. Transferring $100 million from one bank in the United States to a bank in Europe is a slow and long process with a lot of intermediaries in between and costs a lot of money. With Bitcoin, you can do it instantly. It's just you transfer 100 million Bitcoin to Bitcoin, one wallet to another wallet. I think it's what takes maximum 1 hour, I think, and it's there, and you can transfer it back into dollars. So volatility in this short-term transaction, and there are a lot of these transactions in the world. I don't see any reason why an institution should not use Bitcoin for transactions, and I think we will go there. So it's basically it's done, and with that,
those are interesting things to talk about. Will it go there? I mean, like right now we have let me see what they call it. They're calling it the central banking digital currency, the CBDC. So we're coming up with our United States Federal Reserve based digital currency. Okay, so these guys are all on top of it, which is another bit of a spooky factor with inflation, because they can already kind of click a button and then there's all this more money that they can loan to the governments and all this. But with digital currency, well, then the sky's the limit. There's no value to it, and that is a little spooky. That's why I think with Bitcoin it's cool, because it's limited. It's just there.
I'm not so sure if it's spooky. I mean, you have Bitcoin. One point of criticism I had for 1 decade was you can easily replicate Bitcoin. So you can easily create another cryptocurrency. I think up to 2015 or 16, there was just Bitcoin and nothing else. One problem that we had that led to poverty in the past before the internet started was that the logistics behind money was really difficult. So distributing money to all people and making them transact and exchanging services and products against money was a difficult process, because you had to bring physical cash to every single person on the planet. And when I look at Africa, for me, it's one of the reasons why Africa, as a continent, the countries in Africa were poor, because they had such huge distances to overcome, and implementing a proper banking system was a pretty expensive thing. But with digital currencies, I think you can overcome this hurdle. So when you said sky is the limit and you can print money like you want, I'm not so much worried about that.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I mean, there's one thing that destabilizes the society, and it's still poverty. And the governments have to make sure that everybody gets access to money, to being able to at least pay the rent and buy groceries. So this is the minimum standards that every person needs to have to be at the minimum satisfaction level, to not become hostile and violent in a society. And with digital currencies, I think this is a hurdle.
Say that you broke up on that last part. We were talking about how great technology was, and it broke up on that last part of the sentence. Say that one more
time. With digital currencies, the hurdle of distributing money to every be overcome. So it's very, very easy to bring digital currencies, digital money to every person on the planet, which is a great thing to overcome poverty, in my opinion. I mean, a little bit of money printing we will need in future to make everyone having at least a minimum income. And this is something that I see really coming the first time in human history.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, if you look at poverty and how the world finance goes into poverty and all that kind of stuff, poverty could have been eradicated long ago. We all know it. If we all wanted, and I won't say we all, if poverty was really the goal, poverty would just be gone. You know, we can make food out of nothing now. Water is plentiful. I mean, and things like you're talking about, where you can transfer now money instantly anywhere in the world. It's incredible. And so that solves a lot of these distance factors. So at some point you're going to have to get into, you know, when you talk about like that, you go, well, if poverty was the real thing that people wanted solved, it would be solved. And I really believe that if the powers that were in control of that wanted that aspect solved, it would be solved. I mean, if you look how fast the internet grew, or look how fast mobile technology grew, somebody wanted that there, you know, and they really solved it. But like, for example, you know, medicine. Okay. You know, if you go into a hospital and watch somebody pass away, it's not uncommon for me to sit there and go like, you know, I kind of feel this is a little bit barbaric sometimes. Some of these hospitals you go into, you go, you know, it's pretty old in here. You know, it's pretty old technology. It just doesn't feel like how fast certain things have caught up. Consumer electronics is hyper bypassed everything. I mean, you have all this amazing stuff now, and some things are still catching up, right? And again, we're crossing over into like morals and ethics and things like that. But you're crossing that chasm too. It's, you know, at what point do we have the responsibility of saying, well, you know, we can now create this much wealth. How do we handle the woes of the planet? I don't know what it's like over there, but the homeless problem here, like homeless people, it's a crazy problem over here, especially in certain cities. I mean, you have huge tent cities, and it's this problem that it's a very difficult one to address, because these people are half the time, you know, on drugs, heavy drugs, by the way. And we're not just talking like smoking pot and doing cocaine. We're talking like serious stuff like crystal meth and just really life-ruining drugs. And, you know, so these guys are alcoholics. And you do run into the people that couldn't afford to live, but those are smaller in numbers than the ones that are part of the drug populace. And so could you just inject money into that and have it solve the problem? And the answer is going to be no. You know, you can't just throw money at the homeless problem and think it's going to solve. So it's going to get into a lot more than that. It's just, we're going to have this amazing benefit of speed and instantaneous financial transactions. It's going to really benefit it. So we'll still need the people. That's my point, is we'll still need the yous, we'll still need the me's, we'll still need the visionaries. None of this technology will ever bypass the people that are using it. Artificial intelligence will not bypass the visionaries who are going to be able to utilize this for proper purposes.
That's true. That's
Hmm.
probably true. That's probably true. But when I think about the African nations, I think Cardano is one of the cryptocurrencies. What was the name of the founder of Cardano? Charles
I
Hoskinson.
forget.
Charles
Yeah.
Hoskinson. He set a project for Africa where he said, okay, at least what he can do is trying to bring banking systems to regions where they didn't exist before, so that people
Mm.
have basically access to the capitalist system. How is your point of view on such problems?
I think, like I said, these people are going to get as creative as any artist would
Mm.
with their work, and they're going to find newer and faster ways to interject this kind of stuff into a society. Um, but it's going to get down to the people who make the decisions, just as anything. Who's calling the shots? What are they going to do with it? Why do we? You look around you and you can see you have all the same problems that we might have had 30 years ago. They've just changed and technology has advanced around it. Well, why do they still exist? We have this kind of running joke in the United States that there was the war on drugs. Well, drugs won the war on drugs, right? Because they're more prevalent now than they've ever been.
Mm.
What a great war on drugs. Well, I'm not going to go down some conspiracy path with this, but I will say that if there was really a war on drugs and somebody did want to win that, it would have been won. Is it really impossible to cut off drugs coming into a country which has finite borders? No, it's not impossible. You know what I mean? Like, somebody could really do that if they wanted. So you're you just really can't have the blockchain and the internet and all these, whatever the next thing that comes after blockchain is going to be, whatever it is, AI, which is spooky precision in and of itself, because that one can go very far. None of these things will really bypass humanity ever. AI.
I completely agree with that. I mean, business life is always about human to human interaction, and every technology just facilitates that, utilizes that, but that's it. So this is what technology is for. I very often heard you don't need to become an investor anymore, because this will all be done in future by artificial intelligence. I don't believe it. I mean, Warren Buffett, maybe you can replicate the investing style of Warren Buffett with an artificial intelligence. I don't know, maybe or not. But what is attractive in Warren Buffett? Warren Buffett dedicated his whole life to creating a legacy around investing with his value approach. I think he did it for 56 years or something like that. And this hard work, this effort he put in, this expertise, this niche, this micro niche in your terms, that he found for himself, I think is what draws people to him. Just think about it, would be a computer program. It's called Warren Buffett. Would you be attracted to a computer program? I say, okay, a computer program did 20% return per year. Would that be interesting to you? I don't know. To me, not so.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I suppose people have been trying to develop an algorithm for anything. There's algorithms around art. They'll take all these art and they'll take all this art and they'll dump it into an AI program, which will then produce art. And it's interesting. It's interesting. But I'll tell you what it can't produce is life. Okay. There's a life to whatever you do, and there's an interaction. So like in business, money, you have to have money, you have to eat, you have to do all this other stuff. But really, what's interesting about your day to day? Like, why? Let's say that cars are your thing or watches are your thing. Okay, well, you could get all the cool watches in the world, but if you have nobody to share it with, it very rapidly becomes boring. You know what I mean?
That's true.
You could have a super cool 911 or something, but if you do it by yourself, it's just not, unless it involves you with other people, it's just not really that interesting. Money's the same way. Well, what does it matter to have a lot of money? I mean, money gives you opportunities for freedom to do what?
I think
have stuff? No, to interact with people. That's what it gives.
I would agree. I agree to that completely. The human to human interaction. I think it's the storytelling behind it. You mentioned the example of an artificial intelligence that has the ability to draw paintings, to just remodel old paintings into new paintings. My first thought was not, okay, this program is great. My first thought was, I would like to ask the person who programmed that why he did it or why she did it and what the reason was behind it and how much work went into it. I think it's the story behind this artificial intelligence that's interesting to me, and I think probably also to other people. How do you see the necessity for business success to be proficient in storytelling on top
Yeah,
of what you mentioned before.
it's a great point you're making. And the proof of the pudding is in the 90s, okay?
Mm,
Is in the 90s, remember CGI started to come out, and
mm,
there was movies like The Abyss that really vanguarded CGI into Hollywood, okay? And CGI was in some cases cheaper to do than live effects, easier to do than live effects, give a lot more opportunities for things like you'll see these Avengers franchises that are almost all CGI. But the funny thing is that there's a whole culture of people who are just like, oh, great, another shitty CGI movie. Well, why did they say that? Because people supplanted the technology for story and character development, right? Like what matters? You take a movie like that one Tom Hanks movie where he was on a desert island all by himself. There was a character there, and it was him by himself through the whole movie. And you fell in love with that, not the CGI of the effects. And I don't know how much CGI they did. I'm sure there was some. You see what I mean? So there's the humanistic element that technology can never really replace, and technology advances it. The fact that you and I get to have a cool conversation, have a planet apart, technology is just assisting what underlies all of this and
mm.
what makes it all important to begin with.
That's true. I couldn't agree more to that statement. Dan, it's really great talking to you. We have I think now 2 hours in the conversation.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
make it go. You make it go fast, bud.
No, you make it go fast. You're perfect. You're a perfect storyteller, and have a lot of expertise in important areas to everybody, especially this public relations part. Let me ask you one final question. I'm pretty sure you have a crystal ball. Let's share with the audience one thing. In your opinion, in the coming 10 years, which technology that exists right now will have the biggest impact on society?
Well, I think we already know what it is. I think the blockchain really
Mm,
is just going to be, if I'm going to say a fundamental technology, I think the blockchain is going to have the biggest impact on it because everything is, all the interactive things that we do are all being placed on it. So I think that's the number one thing. In terms of, let's maybe go a little bit higher
mm.
on the levels of technology. I think the metaverse is going to get really interesting.
Okay. In which way?
Well, it's funny because you know I'm a VR guy myself. I like VR quite a
Mm,
bit.
mm.
But as a kid in the 80s, you watch movies like Total Recall and Lawnmower Man and all these movies that had VR. I was like, I can't wait for that stuff. Well, now I live in the age where not only do we have it, but it's better than what was in the movies back then.
Mm.
And I find myself not doing it as much as I thought I would. Right? It's incredible. You're transported to a new location and you can do all this crazy stuff in there. And I find it amazing. But the universe of it, I think, is going to be pretty revolutionary. I don't think it'll ever replace like what we're talking about, the personal interaction. I'd rather go sit with three guys and have a conversation and have a cigar than sit in a mask in some virtual world with three strangers from across the planet. Personal eye contact. I just would rather have the actual reality there. But that doesn't escape the fact that this metaverse thing is going to change business. It's going to change meetings. I mean, we're going to become a completely, I shouldn't say we're going to become a completely virtual civilization, but I think that technology is going to really create interactivity on a new level, similar to how Zoom has created instantaneous worldwide meetings where we didn't 10 years ago. And I think it's going to go that fast. And the money being poured into this and the technology being poured into this is going to have a really interesting effect on humanity. Maybe not a good one, like kids growing up in front of their iPads. I noticed that their interpersonal skills are not like mine, where I had a crappy 19-inch TV that I grew up with 5 channels.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know I don't know what the impact on children and humanity is going to be, but it's definitely going to impact things one way or the other. So those are my two top ones that I go, ooh, those are going to be good. Those are going to be good.
What would be a positive impact, in your opinion, of the metaverse?
Um, one thing I don't like is I don't like division.
Mm.
And so you could, like if you go to Europe, it's like, oh, we think this about Americans. You go to Germany, they think this about Americans. You go to America, they think this about Germans, and Canadians think this about Americans, and Americans think this about Mexico. And it's all bullshit. I hate it. It's PR. It's all
Mm.
created it's just created like there's a stereotype about going to Paris that, you know, Parisians are snotty and rude. I couldn't have, when last time I was there, I found that to be 100% not the case. My French is terrible. They were helpful. They were great. They helped me. I had a person sitting next to me help me order eggs and toast one time, and I speak a lick of French to order my eggs and toast. And I just didn't find it to be the case. I found them to be just like me and skinnier than me, but you know, but just like me, in that they were just humans living their life and just good people. And in any country, in any culture, there's shitty people, there's criminals, there's all that, but there's also a majority of the people that are good people. And so if I was to say what the most positive impact of the metaverse is more opportunity for people to see that. Because now you don't have to travel abroad. Like I don't have to go to France to be like, well, these people are just like me. They just speak a different language. Or, you know, if I go to Italy, these people are just real jovial, happy people, you know, like I don't have to now travel to those places to break that mold. And I don't have to believe what the media is telling me, because what the media tells you half the time is bullshit anyway. It's a narrative of somebody's. And so now I get to experience firsthand. I'm going to go hang out with some dude in Manila in the metaverse. I'll be like, this guy's cool, man. You know, and then I get to go hang out with somebody in Hong Kong or Sydney and be like, God, the Australians are pretty interesting people. You see what I mean? It really breaks this mold and it brings out a positive nature and breaks down the barriers of what we've all been marketed to about stereotypes and you know, who's the best and, you know, who are the smartest. I think it's all just crap, that stuff. I hate it. And that's going to be a real opportunity that I think a lot of these metaverse people are going to introduce to us.
Yeah, I believe that. I completely agree to what you say. I think this is the great opportunity that we have, bringing people together and reducing the number or amount of stereotypes in the world. When I think about the technology of the past 30 years, I mean, I grew up in Austria, rural Austria, small town, 10,000 people. In the 80s, 70s, buying a book from the United States in the 80s that was not available in the bookstore already was pretty much impossible. So talking a bookshop owner into ordering a book from California, getting it delivered to Austria was a work that almost nobody wanted to do. Let's just put it that way. With the internet, it changed. Jeff Bezos started Amazon, and the first niche that Jeff Bezos got into was delivering books from everywhere in the world to any place in the world. Then we had Facebook, for example. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg is a controversial personality, meanwhile, but I think what he brought to the world was communication at zero expenses. So with his messenger service, people for the first time in human history could have conversations via Facebook at zero expenses. They could exchange pictures of their children. People who went to in the same school who didn't see each other for 10 years now had the possibility to share the experiences. The next thing, Zoom, for example, I mean, we didn't know each other a couple of weeks ago, and now we
know each
the
other.
Possibility to have a conversation for 2 hours. You in Florida, me in Austria. 10 years ago, impossible. And I think also metaverse will go in a good direction. So
I do too. I mean, you could use anything for fear and control. Governments have been using fear and control in different ways, but you know, I mean, like China shutting down communication, shutting down the internet, and shutting down, you know, their Bitcoin and all that kind of stuff. You could do that, but ultimately, I think that somehow communication will end up traveling, and it's going to allow a lot of freedom. And I think that governments should really they should really just allow that to happen, because you don't have to control everything. You know, you want to keep the bad guys not from doing bad stuff, but like you want to let the freedoms that are going to create industry and economies and you know, other opportunities. You want that stuff to blossom. You don't want to suppress it and hold it down. So I think the smartest governments will allow this to occur. That's why China is going to probably not going to get a real positive impact from their motion and in the crypto world. You know what I mean? And guys like me and you, whether they intended it or not, I have a thought in my head about what I think about that. I won't say what it is. You won't say what yours is, but other people have a thought about what they think about that and what they think about their government. See, they did their own PR move inadvertently. And then you go, well, why did they do it? What are they trying to achieve there, right? And so you can kind of start to see people's motives through activity. But like I said, we have I think I'm very positive about our future. I'm not one of these doomsdayers. It's like, oh, it's going to all go to hell and we're going to live in 1984 from George Orwell. I don't believe that. I really believe that good people will prevail, and the people who try to drag everybody down, they might have a little heyday. They always do, but in the end, they always get what's coming to them, and good people end up thriving and surviving, and society ends up as a whole getting better.
How do you say in English? I think Elon Musk said it, human race is on a good trajectory. When you compare the 80s with 2022, this year is much better than 1984 back then,
Yeah.
because it
Yeah.
built up. So it's
Right.
good way. Then do you have any final words that you would like to say on the podcast, on this episode?
No, we've covered. I mean, you and I jump around very easily all over the place. We could probably keep this up for another 2 hours. Really appreciate you having me on the show.
Thank you for coming. It was really a pleasure talking to you. And maybe we catch up in half a year or so and have another conversation about same topics and see how the world evolved in 2 years, in 6 months.
Yeah, love to.
Have a great day then.
Yep. Pleasure.